Torin Borrowdale is the composer of the Netflix fantasy series Locke and Key. I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby, here with Torin, and we can first just talk about the opening title theme, which it starts small, but then it expands out into this epic orchestral full sound. What were you trying to convey with that opening theme?
Well, there's so many different facets of Lock and Key. I just wanted to try to capture one sort of moment, and that was the amazing discovery of all these keys. So, it starts with a door slam, and it starts kind of small, and, I figured that was like you exploring the house for the first time and kind of coming across all these keys, and then, when you finally discover them, you see how magical they are and all the possibilities you can unlock with them. And so, I figured as it gets bigger, that's you realizing the full potential of these keys and using the anywhere key to go around the world, or, all these crazy transformations. So that was kind of the idea behind the main titles, was the discovery of all these keys.
Mm-hmm. So was there something that just appealed to you about Lock and Key that just made you want to sign on in the first place?
It's funny. I actually didn't read the comics. I hadn't heard of them beforehand. I just heard about the show. And so I got a couple lines about what they were looking for. And basically, I was interested in, this magic fantasy show. And I wanted to make sure, because there's been other versions of Lock and Key, the comics and other remakes, that I wanted to be scoring the Netflix version, because, that's what it would actually be. So, I actually didn't really want to read the comics, because I didn't want to be influenced by, a different version of the show, even though it's the source material. So, what really drew me to it, though, of course, is the complexity of the story, the magic of the keys, how everything ties together. I mean, it's so well written, the source material, and as much as I, would have liked to draw more from how the story went in the comics, I did want to stick with, the way that Netflix wanted to tell it. So, yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. And in the musical score, there's a big use of strings and piano. What was the thought process behind just the specific instrumentation you used?
Yeah, I mean, with the big mythology already inherent in the comics, I wanted to make sure that the score had kind of the breadth and the scope of kind of this epic series, and I didn't want to limit the sound of the score. So I wanted it to be kind of this epic, a classic orchestra. I wanted it to, make sense if it were made 10 years ago or 10 years from now. Like, there's a very cinematic quality to using a full string orchestra with brass, and I wanted to capture that in the score.
Mm-hmm. Were there any influences you were inspired by when you were writing the score? Because for me, there's a bit of a Danny Elfman vibe sometimes. It also reminds me a little bit of the Jim Dooley score for Pushing Daisies. I was just curious if you took inspiration from other kinds of dark, whimsical sorts of works, even just subconsciously.
Yeah, I mean, the scores I listened to growing up, certainly Danny Elfman, James Newton Howard. I think really Lock and Key was a big opportunity for me to kind of fulfill my childhood fantasy of what I wanted film scoring to be. Mm-hmm. I had a compilation CD of Danny Elfman scores, and, James Newton Howard's score for King Kong is one of my favorites, and you can definitely hear the influence in the score for Lock and Key. And this is the first time I was actually able to use a full orchestra on a project for the whole series, and so it was kind of like I was able to capture what I wanted my film scoring dreams to be when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the best moments is when Bode is using the ghost key
Uh-huh.
and that magical soaring emotion that you create with the
Oh,
music.
yeah.
Can you just talk about crafting that track in particular?
I mean, the Ghost Bodhi sequence is like, that's one of the quintessential like scoring moments. Like, when I was in school, you get one 14-minute session with an orchestra, and that was the type of cue that I would love to record with that. So again, fulfilling my childhood dreams of film scoring. I mean, and it's kind of what I was alluding to before about the discovering of the keys. Like, the flight sequence is the epitome of just pure joy, pure magic. Like, there's no danger. It's just pure fun, and so you can really go off the rails with the orchestra and go as big as you want and as expressive as you want. So that was really a fun sequence to do, because you don't get that every day, especially in a TV show.
Mm-hmm. There's also a beautiful track called the Locke Lullaby.
Yeah.
And we get that, I think, kind of recurring with some of the flashbacks, remembering the father. What was just the process behind crafting that theme?
The Locke Lullaby, that represents the family as a whole. And basically, I didn't want it to be Rendell's theme. I wanted it to be the Locke theme, and now just Rendell isn't a part of it. And so the biggest nostalgia for the kids is, when they had bedtime stories read by their father and those memories that they missed. So I thought a lullaby was the perfect way to capture that nostalgia and, that longing for, they miss their dad dearly. And so for me personally, it was really emotional theme to write, because right before I wrote it, my wife was in a serious accident, and I didn't know for a little while what was going to be the results of that. And so that was my, brush with death, and I wrote the Locke Lullaby out of that, because I didn't know what was going to happen, and luckily with a show like this, viewers are able to participate in a tragedy without actually having to experience it. So when I wrote that theme, since I was so close to tragedy, it kind of just poured out of me, and that was what I was feeling at the time.
Wow. So, are you the kind of person who sort of makes charts and outlines of, here's the theme for this character, here's this character, here's this repeating motif I want to do with this storyline, or is it all just instinctive, just like in the moment from scene to scene?
No, I don't make charts, but I'm absolutely that person. I mean, with this score, there are so many characters, there's so many things happening. I really had to keep all my themes straight. So I established them all as early as I could, so that, when I'm writing a scene, I know exactly what it's supposed to be, and there's no guessing. So, a lot of the characters have themes, a lot of the ideas have themes, and I try to construct it as well as, Key House is built. So, between episodes, the themes are consistent. It's just the moods that change. So that's kind of how I like to craft it, where in any individual scene, I know what themes need to be there, and then depending on the mood of the scene, I just alter those themes to kind of match. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out of composing it. But it's a fun challenge, because you get to shape the themes as they go and change with the story. So even though it seems like it's kind of scoring by numbers, there's still plenty of creativity to come from that.
Mm-hmm. What kind of balance did you strike between like providing the right emotional vibe for a scene, but also making sure to not overdo it with the score?
Yeah, that's a tricky thing. In general, I mean, you never know how the mix is going to turn out. So I always wanted to make sure, if it's a big action scene, that there's enough action in the music to carry it along if there's no sound effects. For more intimate scenes, sometimes that gets played even louder than you expect it to. So you want to make sure that the emotion's there and you don't push it too far. I really relied on the themes to give the emotion, and as long as it was in that emotional world, I knew it made sense to the story. And because those themes are tied, to the Locke lullaby, to certain characters, the mood usually felt really natural to begin with, and I didn't have to push it too far. The performance of the actors is so good that I really just had to set the mood, made sure that the theme was right, and then it kind of just worked itself out. I didn't have to push things farther than I needed to go.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of touches did you put on the score that maybe a casual viewer might not pick up on?
Sure. So I did, with the main titles, there's the main theme. It's 5 notes, and you hear it at the beginning of each episode. I wanted to kind of embed that as like a hidden key throughout the score. Mm-hmm. So if you listen to a lot of the other tracks, Key House or Exploring Key House, you can hear the main theme usually like in the bass line or kind of hidden around. So as the Locke family is discovering Key House for the first time, they're walking through the rooms not really realizing that there's magic in the walls all around them. And so, if anyone wanted to listen to the score in that same way, they could find these hidden keys around. You just have to be listening for them.
Very cool. Yeah. So what was the collaboration with the showrunners, Carlton Cuse, Meredith Averill, just about the direction of the music?
Oh, they were great to work with. They gave me a lot of freedom to do what I felt instinctually was right, and they didn't give a lot of notes on like, oh, this needs to be totally different. Like, what were you thinking? It was usually like subtle, tweaks here and there, and so it was great to work with them because I felt like I had the creative freedom to write the score that I really wanted to write and that I felt works best for the picture.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you've dabbled in TV with composing additional music for a few shows, but this was really your first job as a main composer on like a season-long TV series. So what were the challenges that came with composing like a full season of television?
The challenges, it was mainly just the amount of minutes that were to write. We had 4.5 hours to write and record with the full orchestra. So it was just the amount, honestly, because I tried to score it just like I would a movie if it was a really long movie. But, it was really just the challenge of writing every day, meeting all the deadlines for the recording sessions. We had 3 recording sessions. And so, the first episode usually is easiest because you get the most amount of time, and then you realize you've only got, a week left to do the last episode. So it's usually the last episode before the recording session that gets kind of smashed. But it's funny, as a composer, you kind of, as much time as you have, you end up using all of it. Like if you've had 3 weeks to do, 1 episode, you take all 3 weeks. If you've got 1 week, you just do it in 1 week. And generally, you get less sleep and, things are a little more stressful, but it kind of comes out the same. Like, it's just the amount of work that was a bit of a challenge, but, I got through it and I survived.
Yeah. Well, I noticed that poster behind you is a poster of, I believe that's Run, right? With Sarah Paulson. So you also have that movie coming out. Another darker horror kind of project. Anything you can tease about that score?
Oh, sure. That was a fun project to write. It's kind of the opposite of Locke and Key. Locke and Key's got so many characters and it's so epic and grand, and Run is kind of stripped down. There's 2 main characters, and it's really about the tension between 2 people. And so the score, there's only one theme for Run, and it's it was an exercise in how can I use this one theme throughout the score in all these different ways and still make it interesting. So it's certainly darker than Lock and Key, and there's some great suspense. There's some amazing sequences in it. I think audiences will be really happy with it when it finally lands in theaters.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that one, personally. Well, for those of you watching, hit like and subscribe for more interviews just like this, and head to goldderby.com to start making your Emmy predictions. Torin, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Well, thank you very much.